Man's friend, you cry. Well, I'll tell you why. A couple of hours ago, the British summer vented its spleen on the television theatre and Shepherd's Bush and emptied enough water on top of us to float an elephant. Murder it was. That being the case, the TV theatre is out of action for this evening. We've fused the place. However, it's my own fault for having the Bishop of Durham on. No offence, Your Grace. The DG has kindly offered us his broom cupboard in which to do the show at the Senior Fun Factory. So it's me for the magic donut. Follow me closely. Good evening. Good evening. Quiet here, isn't it? Anyway, I shall carry the memory of those BBC drains with me to the grave. Anyway, good evening to you. By some bizarre coincidence, I was going to talk about the silly season. Nothing could be much sillier than has happened today, but the silly season is finally upon us. That period which comes around every time of the year, around about this time, and there seems to be no real news at all, and the papers are full of stories that are so bizarre, if you didn't know better, you'd think they might have made them up. Now, the way you can be sure the silly season has arrived is when the annual monster hunt gets underway up at Loch Ness. Every year, about this time, anorak-clad people by the busload are decanted onto the sides of the loch to wait vainly for old Nessie to pop up and give them a quick flash. Now, this year, the whole charade has been given a faint aura of scientific respectability with a conference of cryptozoologists who spend their lives tracking down the world's mythical monsters, from the giant cats of the Congo to lovable Nessie. And they're not the only ones who are concerned with the monster. Researchers at the Wogan Institute for Scientific Knowledge about Yetis, monsters and critters, Whiskey Mac, as it's known, have been conducting their own research into the Loch Ness monster and have unearthed some amazing pictures. This, of course, is the one that started it all, taken 50 years ago by a surgeon who swears it was the monster. I think he'd been sniffing at the wrong anesthetic. But yesterday, one of our team turned up this photograph amidst great excitement. Was this, we asked ourselves, the photographic confirmation the world had been looking for? No, it wasn't. Out of harm's way, so to speak. Then we thought we'd really found something with this. It turned out to be a floating German Mao. The trouble with Chinese monsters is that you find one and 2 hours later you feel like finding another. And then we thought, Eureka, we've cracked it. Of course, it was President Reagan, not a monster at all. Oh, I don't know, though. No! Though he is 3,000 years old, of course. But enough with this mockery. My first guest tonight is one of those cryptozoologists I was talking about. Now, later on, I'll be talking to Paul Medford, Kelvin of EastEnders, to Shirley Conran, the superwoman, and to another superwoman called Jan Little, a remarkable woman. There's music from Jessie Ray to, as it were, sustain the Scottish motif. But first, a man who, well, actually, let's meet him and talk to him, because he's in charge of the Nessie Centre there. So let's join him. Hey, thank you for joining us. Come in, please, sir. No applause tonight. No applause. Tony Harmsworth. Now, Tony, there's no applause tonight, as you can see.
No, that's just because there's no monster here?
No, it's because that I forgot to turn on the applause machine. Normally we have a select band of people, a raucous group, who joins, but within this enclosed space, of course, you and me are on our own. Anyway, I wanted to dispel the idea that you are necessarily a believer in the mythology of the Ness, are you?
Well, I look at it objectively. The Loch Ness Centre presents material, and it's up to people how they analyse that material. If they want to believe there are Loch Ness monsters, it's up to them. If they want to disbelieve, well, again, it's up to them.
What do you believe?
Oh, there's something there.
Huh?
Well, there's something there.
It could be anything, couldn't it? I mean, you have to believe there's something there, otherwise there'd be no point to you doing your job, would there?
Well, I suppose you have to say there's a commercial interest. I maybe have to say there's a Loch Ness monster. But that's not the reason that I do. I mean, I have looked at the evidence. Many years ago, I was far more convinced maybe that it was a plesiosaur or something in Loch Ness. But as time's gone by, then I've mellowed, and I think there's something large in Loch Ness, but maybe it's not the dinosaur-type image of the past.
How does this investigation by cryptozoologists, how does this differ from the others?
Well, cryptozoologist is a funny name. You look for strange animals. The group that are actually researching Loch Ness, the British group, the Loch Ness and Moray Project, well, in fact, they are scientific. They have a biologist who works full-time for them, and they handle the whole thing on a scientific basis. And this expedition coming up in October is to resolve work that they've done in previous years.
I see. Now, what are they going to do? They're actually going to cover the whole area of the loch with sonar. Is that right?
More or less. In 1982, they got very strong sonar contacts, about 40 of them. They couldn't explain these by any of the side echoes and the known phenomena. But what they're doing this time is they're using some very simple equipment. It's echo sounders, and they're being sponsored by the manufacturer. And the echo sounders will be mounted on 20 vessels that'll be side by side, and they go right up Loch Ness.
So it's a blanket?
It's a curtain. You're hanging a curtain of sonar in the water.
But is this going to definitely answer the question? Now, we'll know with a great certainty from the bleeps whether there's anything down there. We'll know now, won't we?
Well, there certainly would be more press coverage of this than there has been of anything in the past. It's probably the biggest expedition there's ever been, probably the biggest there'll ever be.
Yeah.
But if they don't get contacts, then they then have to look at the steep walls and the shallow bays. If they do get contacts, then we're going to be looking for sponsorship for the major follow-up work that will have to be done.
If they finally do find out, of course, if they don't get any bleeps at all, that's the end of your job. And that's the end of the whole industry, isn't it?
Oh, not at all. I mean, Central Africa now, they run these safari parks. We've all seen lions and giraffes in zoos.
Yeah, but I mean, if they discover there isn't a monster, if there's nothing there, that's the end of it all.
Very difficult to prove a negative. That certainly won't happen in October.
So we're actually going to be as wise as when we started, aren't we?
No, because if these contacts are in midwater, then the path forward is clearly shown. And in fact, there was an erroneous press report about these being declassified American sonar. It's not, in fact. So just to put the record straight, these are very simple echo sounders. Targets will come up in midwater, and they'll then have to find out what these targets are.
But it is not in anybody's interest to disprove this myth.
No, I suppose it's not. Doesn't everybody love a mystery? We happen to have a mystery here that the closer you come to it, the more real it seems.
Of course, and it's fun for everybody. I mean, it would be, I think, anticlimactic if they found a real monster down there. Then we'd all have to believe it instead of being slightly cynical and cryptical.
You would, wouldn't you? And we'd have to then come and have a serious look at the leprechauns.
You have to find the thing, yeah. Yes, but in the meantime, thank you for joining us.
Look, I've got something here, actually, for your Wogan investigation.
Yes, what is it?
Well, it hatched out on the way to the studio.
Good grief.
And this is one of the souvenir items around Loch Ness, and it's done by a local artist, Carol Lynn Penny.
Johnny, I'll eat it here.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Tony Harmsworth.
Thanks for the applause.
Not at all. I like it like this. There's a sort of just the heavy breathing of the cameramen. Not all of Scotland's weird and wonderful creatures are lurking beneath the waters of Loch Ness. Some of them are swimming in far murkier waters. Those